Dober večer in lepo, da ste ostali tudi po filmu. Pa še enkrat, let us welcome Goran Stolevski, the director and screenwriter of the film.
Thank you.
Vljudno vabljeni, kot rečeno, da sodelujete v tem pogovoru, da kaj vprašate, poveste svoje mnenje ali pa vtis. In pa to, da bo pogovor potekal v angleškem jeziku, a bi si kdo zelo želel, da prevajam. Okay. So let us start. I have invited also the audience to ask questions, to tell you some impressions or anything, that they're very welcome. But to start the conversation, perhaps to talk about the origins. Why decide to make a film about family life? It is a very acute question, I would say, the form of a family in this world that we live in, and there are much crashes about this, but why was it your imperative to make this film?
I tend to follow instinct first before I try to understand why I'm doing things, and the main elements of the story came from, initially it was just the setting of the story, this household with, full of queer people, but also multiple generations, and just constant chaos, essentially. And then I had individual characters and personalities emerge and individual scenes, and the story shaped itself into what it did. It didn't really set out consciously with an agenda of telling a story about a family at all. It's just kind of what emerged instinctively, essentially.
But it is also set in Macedonia, which is a specific setting, one would say, especially for all the circumstances they are living. You did shoot your films before in the region, in Macedonia, Serbia, and so, but were not so specifically set in the social, in the setting. Did you think to bring it to Macedonia, the story from the beginning, or?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, at the time that I was writing this film was 2016, so 5 years before I shot, even my first feature. By that point, I'd made like 20 short films, or 23. None of them had gone to any festivals yet. I was the most failed filmmaker that ever failed. Like, there wasn't any concept of strategy behind things, to be honest. Even when I was writing this, it was set in Macedonia, and it was, a queer story with an Albanian female lead, like lesbian. It was, ding, 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 jackpot. I was sure that the Macedonian National Film Agency was going to jump on that. It was, I wasn't writing it even with a practical sense of this might ever get made. I was just trying to kind of, me dealing with failure was literally burying myself in story worlds, a movie at a time. And initially when I had the idea, it was inspired by a photograph I saw of a queer household like this one from Melbourne in the 1970s, but I wanted to do something in the present tense, and I wanted to do something, to be honest, like we're used to seeing very, Western European or American kind of concepts of what queerness is, and it's like gay people don't exist in these areas, and it's like you don't really choose where you're born. I think statistically speaking, most LGBT people born alive today live in countries where, it's the reality is way closer to the Macedonian one than it is to others. So I kind of chose Macedonia more as a stand-in for like pretty much all of Eastern Europe or Southern Europe or really even North Africa or the Middle East, because I felt it was more relevant, and because I feel like these stories, if you don't tell them now in the present tense, they will fade, and it'll be like they never existed. And why Macedonia instead of the other countries? Obviously, I grew up there, so I have, I think any story can be made interesting, but it's the details and authenticity that kind of make it kind of connect with people, even if they're not from that area, And with Macedonia, I know the rhythm of these words. I know what people talk about at a dinner table. I know what kids, how kids swear. Like like I can fill in the details very quickly, essentially, and it came from there. And yeah.
But also the Roma community. Did you kind of have to study, or is it something that you already know, how they live, how they... Which is a silly question from me, because actually all the characters in the film are just universal, but they are very specific in a way.
No, but absolutely, like the life circumstances shape them, you know, in a way that they can't always control, obviously. So actually, when I was putting it together, like thinking of, like I didn't really know too many queer people yet in Macedonia at the time. There was one main person I definitely did know of more than know him closely, and he happens to be coincidentally part Roma. And it kind of went from there a little bit. And you know, I don't even know at what point I made the specific decisions to make so many of the characters Roma or not. But also I'm often driven based on like documenting kind of a time and a place in as much detail as possible. And like in Macedonia, I grew up in a class with 36 kids in school. 9 of them were Roma. You know, 2 of them were sitting next to me in class for like years. The story she talks about, you know, like I did the same homework as the other girls and I got a C and I was meant to be happy about it, was because I vividly remember like a friend being, you know, she was Roma and she was happy she got a C. And this is someone who was clearly very smart and knew, you know, like what she was doing and had the exact same homework as the girl sitting next to me on the other side, who happened to be the vice principal's daughter, who had A's. And I remember noticing that and not really thinking about it. And then I moved to Australia, where I was the migrant who had to prove himself 10 times more. Nowhere near, like, I don't at all want to compare it to what, you know, Roma people have to go through. And I remember then, as an Australian, returning to Macedonia the first time and catching up with my old classmates, and the girl I'm talking about, who used to just hang out with everyone, and it was quite mixed and integrated. Not just her, but the 4 Roma girls in my class only ever hung out with each other entirely. And this girl who used to be very open and like did her work and tried her best, obviously something had happened to like isolate her, and you know, I realized bits of what I was dealing with in Australia was obviously happening there, and like just putting 2 and 2 together. You know, I thought about that for years, essentially. And when I was writing the film, I wasn't specifically thinking of the incident when I started writing about it. But again, it's that matter of like, yeah, we can talk about oppression and like assume that it's bad, but you need like detail to make it feel real, and because that's how it is real, you know. So that's the story that came to me when I was writing that, and then the rest of the, like, I mean, a lot of Svojega is my brain just put in a, you know, 35-year-old Roma woman's, and we're not that different. But yeah, it came from there.
You're talking about detail. The film is full of detail, and it's quite masterfully made, but also the actors are just magnificent to watch in this film. Could you tell us a little bit about, because the main actress is a known Romanian actress, Ana Maria, but we presume that some of them are not professional actors, some of them are. How did you first find them?
Yeah, no, Ana Maria learned all the dialogue phonetically. She doesn't speak a word of Macedonian in real life. And Alina, who plays Svojega, her partner, is also Romanian and also learned all of the dialogue phonetically. And she speaks 2 languages in the film. There's Macedonian and Roma. And, you know, we communicated in English, obviously. So Ana Maria is a friend of mine from, you know, we made other films before as well. And then she knew of Alina, and that's how I kind of discovered her. And there were only 2 trained female actresses of Roma background, not just in Macedonia, across the entire region. You know, we went to neighboring countries as well, researching. And one of them is in the film. She plays the grandmother. She was also involved as like, you know, she was helping as kind of an acting coach for the little girl informally, and location, like she helped in a lot of things with the film actually. So, you know, she was very important on set. And then the other person who was trained, it was in the right age range for Svojega, but didn't kind of, she didn't speak Roma herself and didn't have quite the right energy for it, so I realized I had to look for another actress anyway. And Alina had already played German, didn't speak German, won the Lola Award for Best Actress, by the way, so she's got a German Oscar. She played French, doesn't speak French. I'm just like, Macedonian will be fine. It was more to me like important to, you know, she's also an activist and a filmmaker herself. So it was more like, you know, she needs to want to do the film. She needs to want to do this role. But that was thankfully an easy conversation. And then with all the, we had two separate casting agents. One was in charge just of the Roma speaking parts, and I think there's about 35 of them. And there was another casting agent in charge of the rest. Because when you're casting non-trained actors, you have to, like, Kate Grubac, who is the, you know, casting agent for that part, was in Šutka every day for 3 months, including during most of the shoot. Like, I think 3/4 into the film, we still hadn't cast. The last role we could cast was Servet, the other gay. We couldn't find a second person who was willing to play a gay character in a Roma film. Because it was like, there was one boy who was desperate to be in a movie, and then he found out it's a gay character. I was like, I can't do that. And he was devastated, because and in the end I gave him another role anyway. I made up one. Then we found another guy who also decided not to do it. Then Alina had found like a queer Roma, like not activist, but a queer Roma boy who just really wanted to support the film, wanted to be in it. And I'm like, great, I'll take anyone, literally, it's fine. And when he found out he would have had to play gay himself, he's like, he couldn't do it because it would impact on his life, you know. And I understand that, so, you know, I have full empathy for that. Finally, the last day before shooting, we had this one guy who was like, yeah, it's fine. Like, thank God. Yeah, he's never acted, never thought about acting. There was no rehearsals. So on the day we turn up and there's like, you know, light is going away, I'm just like, okay, great. So we're shooting in sunrise with a person who's never been on set. How's this gonna go? Thankfully, it went okay. But that was just like one example, but pretty much with everyone else. We didn't do traditional auditions because I feel like even with actors, when you ask them to audition, the persona that emerges in a very controlled environment is never what you get on set anyway. So I find, and I think you're putting people through a lot of awful things when you're asking them to audition anyway. So basically we just had photographs and a conversation with the casting agent. Initially we didn't really tell too many people about what the film was about because you have to be very careful explaining that you're making a film that has gays and children in it. But actually, like, gradually, like, the whole Šutka community was, you know, aware of it, obviously. We actually had a really good experience on that end of things. But it was also kind of like, I cast whoever was willing to be in the movie a lot of the time and just learned to work with it. Like, Samson, who plays Ali, I saw a little clip of he was in a high school play once. And he was okay in that. Like, he was willing to be in the movie and he fit the age range. I'm like, sure. Like, I met with him. He seemed, again, he's very creative by nature. So there was also this sense of like, this is a person, oh my God, actually, speaking of casting. So, okay, he really wants to be in a movie and he's gonna be in the movie, and great. He's like, yes, so I have to work night shift delivering pizzas while we're shooting, but that's fine, I'll do both things. I'm like, you can't do 12-hour shooting days and also work a night shift. So we had to talk, like, have a separate committee of people go talk to the pizza restaurant owner to pay him, firstly, a bribe to let Samson have a 4-week holiday, then to pay him to hire someone else, pay that man's income on top of it, and pay for his training. And this was a process that took stages and stages, because ultimately it's this thing of like, Samson needs to have a job at the end of it, you know? So again, this is one other example. It was all kind of like this, and then on set, the way we worked is kind of Jada, who plays Mia, the 5-year-old, was kind of prioritized whenever she felt like turning up on set. We had about 3 minutes maximum before she would be just like, I'm done. Genuinely, she was kind of in charge. And whenever she would turn up, sometimes she would refuse to just, you know, turn up at the start, so we'd shoot most of the scene, and then eventually halfway through a take, she's coming, so everything has to be rearranged. It's just like the queen is coming, you know, like, so the whole crew and cast is just ready, and we're all like doing everything, and then we shoot her footage as much as we can, and then if there's any changes, like, kind of, because I'm editing the film kind of in my head as I'm going along, I would compensate that way. But I kind of had like Anna Maria, Alina, and Vladimir, who plays Tony, as my, you know, I feel like when you're the director, it's a bad word for it. Directing means you're telling them what to do, and if you're telling them what to do, I mean, they'll do it, but it'll be very stiff. Even with trained actors, it'll be very artificial. It's more like, I think directing is kind of nurturing, kind of creating an environment so that like feelings can come in, you know, and then emerge in the film. And more trained actors know how to control that a little bit, you know, on a schedule, but still, like, I think the rawness you get from non-trained actors is totally worth working in a different way, and even that brings out something from the others. But I felt like the older actors kind of were my, like, you know, I was mom and they were my fellow parents. Well, actually, Anna Maria was very much dad. She has a very dad energy. Which is great for the character, and yeah, we kind of made it work in unconventional ways.
But how do you prepare the scene, for example, with the actors? Do you talk, I mean, do they have a precise dialogue, or do you set the circumstances or the set?
I mean, they were allowed to improvise pretty much. I said as much as they want to, but I say that to every actor, full well knowing that when they feel free, the performance becomes organic because they kind of take their time and they'll say things when they feel like them. But they'll end up saying exactly what's written. If you tell them to say it exactly as written, it'll come up, you know, they'll miss something because they're trying to concentrate on what it was. But this way it kind of emerges more organically. So about 95% of the dialogue on screen was written in the end. But I was trying to kind of create circumstances where, you know, it's almost like the camera started rolling at some point, and it didn't mean that was, like, we'd say action, which meant the crew was ready and everything was working, but it didn't mean the actors had to perform straight away, to the extent that I would personally start interrupting at the start and just have a normal conversation with them, so they just forget about the camera and we're talking and we're feeling our way through it, and then somehow at some point it becomes the actual dialogue from the film and it's like, go quiet, and then they take over, you know, and then sometimes if they miss a line, we'll help them or whatever, and that was kind of the process. Or there was the day when we were shooting the scene where, you know, they're discussing how to get a birth certificate, like, you know, shortly after the funeral, and it's the full room of them, and some are crying and so on. Samson, who plays Ali, just was not able to deliver his lines, or he would say them, but he was confused and whatever. So we shot everyone else's stuff first, and at some point I knew. We had a break, and he's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm so distracted." And I was like, "Oh, it's fine, don't worry about it." And he's like, "Yeah, it's just my wife is in hospital giving birth right now," which I wasn't told. I'm like, "Oh my fucking God!" And anyway, don't worry about anything. So instead of just shooting it like a normal scene, how a set operates, I kind of sent everyone away, apart from, you know, the camera, me, and instead of having everyone else, there was me and the person in the cast he felt least intimidated by, who was Sarah, who plays Elena. So I sat her down one end, I sat myself down on the other. We worked his eye line, and we just had him deliver the lines straight to us over and over again. We would repeat them to him so he could just learn them, and he knew that there wasn't any pressure because he could just say it 10 times and eventually we'd be good. And then eventually, you know, I edited it, so it flows. And, you know, half the stuff that the little girl says, she didn't really say in that moment. She said it somewhere else. I'm like, this will be useful in this scene, and, you know, massaging it that way. And then there was improv with the scene where they go to Shutka to visit the grandma. She kind of took over. I mean, she was encouraged to, and sort of built up this personality that, you know, some of it is written, but then she built on top of it. And we didn't rehearse, so as soon as she, like, you know, we just rolled, and that was the first take. It was the first version I was seeing of it, which I loved because I was also discovering things at the same time, and organic, raw stuff was happening. And also, she obviously felt like she could do whatever. I hadn't told her not to do anything yet. And I remember after the first take, she turns around to me, and like, it's her first take, but she's been around on set for a while. But she turns around to me, she's like, "I'm sorry, I just feel like that's what she would do, this woman in this situation." And I was just like, "I'm sorry, Anna Magnani, you're doing fine. Don't worry, let's keep going." So the most improvisation that happened was really her in that scene. And yeah.
A bi mogoče kdo od publike kaj vprašal? Aha, tam na balkonu je ena gospodična. Aha.
Okay. Hi, my name is Sara, and as a fellow Macedonian, I would like to ask you how well is the film accepted in Macedonia? I mean, the critics and everything, because did you have any projections yet there? And how are the people reacting? Because we both know Macedonians can be quite homophobic, and you're touching some themes that are not that well, how do you say, talked in Macedonia. For example, people in Šutka and stuff.
No, absolutely. No, it's been like freakishly positive, to be honest. It did play, so a week after Venice, it premiered at the Braća Manaki, so the main festival in the country, and it was the opening night film. And it became the opening night film because it was just the most successful of the 3 films Macedonia made that year. It was just automatically slotted. I'm not even sure the director of the festival had seen it, to be honest. And everyone, it's in this industrial town towards the Greek border, and everyone like turns up to this festival to just wear a dress on the red carpet. Like, they don't know what they're gonna watch. They don't care what they're gonna watch. Like, it's the festival. It's the opening night. So, and obviously it's a very conservative place on top, even within the country. And the other thing that happened is like, the dignitaries get invited. So the national archbishop, or whatever you call him, who organizes anti-pride parades, was there as well, which was wonderful. I only found out as I stepped into the theater and locked eyes, and I was like, well, let's see how this goes. And yeah, none of these people knew what the film was about, and obviously it was very confronting for some of them. Some walked out, but 90% of the audience stayed and laughed like halfway through when Ali says like, thank you for finally letting me say I do to the man I love in front of a registrar. Like, the whole audience laughed, including people who I'm sure were extremely homophobic and racist and all these other things, but while they're watching the film, they're enjoying it. And they're unconsciously picking up on, they're not laughing at him, they're laughing with him. They're taking the side of this gay Roma boy. And afterwards, the 2 main things I heard said to me or said around me were, firstly, everyone sounded like we talk. Most Macedonian productions, the language is stilted. Usually you're made to write dialogue in a very literate way, which no one speaks in, whereas in this film, everyone sounds like how they would in real life. So people like that. And the other thing was, the scene with the doctor, that happened to me. The scene at the start. Because, it happens to people who are not Roma as well. The ones who are Roma just get it a lot worse. But that scene is based on what happened to my granddad when I went with him to hospital. It's not, and especially it was very, that month, it was September last year, and the story that emerged for that month was, for I think over a decade, doctors around the country had been giving chemotherapy patients placebo and selling chemotherapy doses on the black market. So this was the context in which this film was being watched, and this was the reality. And by the way, no one's yet gone to trial for any of that. So I think people just watched it like, it just became like it's a story, and there's people, the critics were raving. It was incredibly positive. I'm still stunned by that, and including some older male critics I wouldn't have expected kind words from. It played in cinemas a few weeks later. The usual amount of Macedonians who watch art house Macedonian cinema went to see it. I think it's about 200 people, or a little bit more than that. But then it played again in cinematheques, and there's been a lot of sponsored screenings recently that I was told were sold out. So it's getting a higher profile. And yeah, I think with the Roma community, I think they were pretty happy with it. But I feel like they should be answering rather than me, quite frankly. And yeah, that's it so far. Thank you.
Še kakšno vprašanje mogoče?
Yeah, Alenka, I would like to congratulate for the film, because in fact the background of the film is sad and universal somehow, but through the person like Maria, you succeeded to put optimism in the life, because I'm sure that everywhere, anytime, there are people or persons or somebody who is able to change the story of the life from the most, how to say, pessimistic or however, to bring to some sunshine, and at the end everything is fine if you are able to see the things as they are. It's not everything bad, even if the conditions are extremely sad. Thank you.
No, thank you. That was very important to me as well, in that sense of no one's life is ever, European social drama every day, social realism. Like nobody's life is bleak every moment of every day, and especially in this context where it's like the story, being its nature, is going to touch on sad and tragic themes. I was very much always trying to find the joy or music or comedy as much as I can, and love and tenderness and positivity, without sugarcoating things. And also because you're trying to me, it's more like I'm driven by documenting what life feels like for a certain set of people, irrespective of what demographics they are or aren't. And you kind of want to capture all of it. So we purposely decided with the colors, even when we choose costumes, it was like, what color is missing from the background to put that in. I made sure not to use any filters to make it like bleak and gray, like all European drama was for about a decade. Because life is not like bleak and filtered, and saying that life is bleak is not anything that's profound. Like 90% of the population knows that already. Thank you, Mr. Director. The effort was always to try to have as complete a version of life as possible, which I think does contain a lot of hope and joy. And people have to, keep going and find ways to live life to the fullest. And especially people from these demographics, like, we tend to be just always miserable when we're depicted, and it's like, it's no longer interesting, and B, like, it's just not what life is like. But so yeah, thank you for your words.
Še kakšno vprašanje mogoče? Aha, še na balkonu tam.
Congratulations, I really enjoyed the movie. My question is about the choice of music in the film, especially classical music. You had a lot of it, especially, for instance, you have Chopin, but for cello, not piano. And I was wondering in what stage of your process the music comes in. Is it in editing, or is it already before?
So all the songs, for example, I know that's not the main part of the question, but the songs they sing on screen, we have to, clear for copyright and everything. So that was decided in advance. And then I had the sense of, I came across for previous films when I was trying to figure out what to do with the scores, a musician who was performing classical music, but just on solo classical guitar, and I thought it was quite beautiful and also very intimate. Because me putting an orchestra, in most of this film wouldn't work. It would just look like I'm trying to make it look like a Vin Diesel movie. It doesn't quite fit. But I was very conscious of, I didn't want to exoticize the Roma people on screen with any ethnic instruments, which is, usually they're exoticized, they're like seen as this other thing, like their feelings are niche, not universal. And I'm like, no, I mean, their feelings are as much Bach as yours or mine. So I was very purposely trying to connect the emotional moments for, Vanessa and Suada around classical music, but I mainly chose a piano for that. And then for Dita, it was same, but on acoustic guitar. The thing about Dita listening to opera came out of the edit. I forget why or how I came up with it. I also know nothing about classical music, so this is all very complicated, me trying to track these pieces down, or any pieces, on a low budget. And so it was a surprise to even the actors when they watched the film. They're like, when did this come from? They liked it, but it was new. And when I'm editing, I feel like I write the film kind of from, with words, when it's at script stage. When you're directing it, it's kind of like images and kind of postures and actors that are kind of, you're writing it through them. And then when you're editing, it's almost like how they're breathing and blinking, like in their own feelings, reshapes it again. And then on top of that, I feel like you need to keep building. You can still keep writing it and adding in new ideas. And I like this sense of, Dita is she became very educated, because the part of the film is about class. Like, I think, I know in Western Europe, everyone assumes it's just white privilege that is helping Dita in life. And it's like, no, she's the daughter of a parliamentarian, and that's what's helping her. As an Albanian woman growing up in the 90s, she wouldn't have had it easy, much less as a queer woman and all these things. She's inherited a house, And you know, so there was we happened to we needed to have a house that looked rich, and then that had a classical piano. Anna Maria is trained in piano, so she was like, you can't have a piano in a movie and no one plays it. So she played it. And then it kind of helped set up the character. We did that on the first day when we were just doing practice shots. And at some point, I wanted to have her reading a book. I had just got this book of poetry. It happened to have French translations of the original. She speaks French, so she read the French version. She wasn't meant to read it out loud. I said action instead of her just like looking at the book. Suddenly she started like reading the words in French. And a scene that was meant to be like 4 seconds suddenly became a minute. You know? And then I was like, okay, how do I justify this? And then actually Elena's response of I understood fuck all was literally her improvisation in that moment. So that's improvised. But that also tells me like this is like a character in this country who knows French, who can play piano. So she knows all the class things because she has to, because in order to, it's not going to be her whiteness that helps her in this society. It's going to be her being the proper woman who knows things, who's educated, and you know. And then I was like, if she listens to classical music as well in these moments, in this little cocoon. And if I can set up this thing where people just keep switching it off for her, if she switches it off when she's angry, it's just another element. And it took a lot of careful editing because there's no radio where they're like meant to be switching it off on screen. And yeah, it came from there. And then obviously there's Muškarčina, which is a whole separate story. But yes.
I was going to ask you about the house. Did you find it? Is it a location or?
Yeah, we did. That was, again, like, there was a little bit of location scouting before I arrived, and when I saw the images, I was like, I love this place, because it looks like, I don't know, every grandma's house from the 80s. And we had a very international set, like, we had Serbs and Croats, and, you know, most of Yugoslavia was represented. And every time anyone stepped in, it was just like, there was this sudden thing of, like, I'm a child again. And it was nice, because we were, like, spending our time there, but also just the way it was laid out meant, because obviously you may have noticed a lot of the film is close-ups, and they're very low depth of field, which means you have to stand pretty far away with the camera to get the close-ups. So you have to find rooms where you can do this while there's a lot of people around, a lot of furniture, and the layout of the house and the specificity of it. Even the decor that was there that we could also build on was already great. And then upstairs we added a wall to make the corridor look a certain way, but we didn't change too much to it. But yeah, it was a magical place.
Bizarre thing on the wall, some kind of dressing of the walls, also very interesting.
Which one? Oh, that came with the house. Yeah, everyone asked about, like, it's so funny. So many people ask me about that wall in the hallway, in the staircase. Is that yeah, it was pretty impressive. But actually, the woman whose house it belongs to kind of designed it herself. She's an architect. And it's her prize, like, so even getting permission for that was very complicated because, you know, it's her prize. It's not just her home, but it's her baby. So, you know, I feel very privileged to have had the chance to do it. And, like, luckily, you know, we had such a great experience. They've let, like, 4 other crews film there since. But, yeah, hopefully no one notices it's the same house in, like, 5 different films and ads.
Še kakšno vprašanje mogoče? Then perhaps I would just ask you for the end, what would you say that was the most interesting or lovable or, I don't know, kind of thing that maybe changed you a little on the shooting of this film?
The first thing that comes to me wasn't during the shoot. Well, there were probably a lot of things during the shoot, but I just know that when we were in Venice with the film, and like, I was kind of, I mean, I'd seen it enough times by that point. So I was watching like Samson and Mia watch. Mia is the name of the actress who plays Vanessa, watching it on screen. Firstly, like, you know, it's Venice Film Festival, so you're walking into a standing ovation, and we're all like dressed up and on a red carpet. And then just what I think they didn't realize. So the film is distributed by Universal, technically, the studio, because Focus Features belongs to Universal. What that means is that when it plays at Venice, this film that we did, you know, in Skopje and Shutka, like just a random bunch of people kind of scrambling to make this thing quickly, is them playing in Venice, and they're in this movie, and it starts with the Universal logo, which is like the planet spinning, and you know, like this orchestral music, and you're just like, I mean, even they were like, they didn't say it, but you could see it in their face, like, fuck, it's a real movie, you know? And it starts, and they're seeing themselves, and it's just, you know, again, they've seen bits of it already, and they hadn't seen the full film yet. This is the first time, but just, you know, it's like you're watching kids watching something for the first time, and even just like seeing the place, like the places that they live in, just seeing them on the big screen and going like, oh my fucking God. And normally I hate when people talk in the cinema, but this was the one exception where it's just like, it was just the most amazing thing. And, you know, just Universal was in charge of our handling technically. So they'd take us to dinner, you know, on the canal, and like, we're sat at this table with all these CEOs, and it's just, you know, a bunch of scrappy kids from Skopje and Stuttgart, and it was just, you know, that experience. And quite a lot of the cast and the crew came, you know, Sanella, who plays the grandma, came along as well. Like, it was just, I think that's what kind of changed me, because like, it can be, like, it breaks you, you know, filmmaking a lot of the time, and like, to make it feel worth it, like, fuck, you have to cherish some moments, and that's the one I go back to actually a lot.
Če ni nobenih vprašanj več, if there are no more questions, then I will thank you, but I will also invite us all to the foyer for, I will have to speak Slovenian now, za prigrizek in kozarček, in se lahko tam še naprej pogovarjamo. Thank you for this talk, and especially for your film. Looking forward to see your next film.
I can't wait. Yeah. Hvala vam.